Most people fear coming home to an empty house. I came home early and I wish to God it had been empty. The name's Rick Coleman, 58 years old, and I've been investigating insurance fraud for the past 25 years. Nothing prepared me for what I was about to uncover in my own home. Let me tell you something about marriage. After 30 years of sharing a bed, a bank account, and a bathroom with someone, you develop a sixth sense about them. You know when something's off. You feel it before you see it. Like a smell in the air that doesn't belong. That Tuesday morning, I felt it the moment I turned into our street. I wasn't supposed to be home. My conference in Chicago had wrapped up a full day early, something about the keynote speaker having a family emergency. Personally, I think he just looked at the crowd and lost his nerve. Either way, I caught the first flight back to Denver. No calls made, no texts sent. I figured I'd surprise Patty. Maybe pick up her favorite Chinese takeout on the way. Maybe actually sit across from my wife at dinner for once without case files spread between us. I was feeling good. Should have known better. The first thing I noticed was Danny's beat-up Honda in the driveway. Now Danny is my son, 29 years old, married to Crystal for 3 years. They live in a small apartment downtown that we helped them get set up in. Seeing his car at our house on a Tuesday afternoon wasn't just unusual. It was strange. Danny doesn't do surprise visits. Hell, Danny barely does scheduled visits. I sat in my car for a moment and said out loud to nobody, Rick, "Why is your unemployed son's car in your driveway at 2 in the afternoon?" I had no good answer for myself. I grabbed my laptop bag and walked to the front door. The second thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind where everyone's relaxing. The thick, heavy, wrong kind of silence. The kind that has weight to it. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Danny and Crystal were sitting together on our living room couch. Here's the part that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. They weren't watching TV. They weren't on their phones, they were just sitting there like two people in a doctor's waiting room who had already accepted whatever bad news was coming. Danny looked up first. "I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you because this detail changed everything for me." He wasn't surprised to see me. "Think about that. Your father, who's supposed to be in Chicago for another day, walks through the front door and you don't even blink. No shocked expression. No, Dad. What are you doing here?" "Nothing. Just a slow nod and a look I can only describe as calculated." Crystal smiled. And I'm telling you that smile had no business being on anyone's face that afternoon. "Danny, what's going on? Where's your mother?" He cleared his throat and said, "Dad, hey! We were actually just about to call you, were you?" I said it flat. "Not a question. Mom had an episode this morning," he said. "She's at Presbyterian Hospital, but she's stable." I didn't hear anything after Presbyterian Hospital. I was back in my car in 10 seconds flat. I know because I counted. Something about shock makes your brain latch onto the most useless details while the important ones try to kill you. I called Gary on the way. Gary Mitchell has been my best friend since college. The man has seen me through 2 career changes, a midlife crisis that involved buying a motorcycle I couldn't ride, and the absolute disaster that was my attempt at growing a mustache in 2018. If there's anyone on earth who will tell me the truth without sugarcoating it, it's Gary. He picked up on the second ring. "Rick, what's up, buddy?" "Patty's in the hospital," I said. "Presbyterian." I just got home and Danny and Crystal were sitting in my living room, like they were waiting for something to happen. Dead silence on his end. Then, "What do you mean, waiting?" "Gary, my son, didn't even react when I walked through the door. I was supposed to be in Chicago until tomorrow." Another pause. Then, very quietly, he said, "Rick, I need you to stay calm." "I am calm," I said. "No," he said, "you're driving. That's not the same thing." He wasn't wrong. Presbyterian Hospital was 20 minutes from our house. I made it in 12. I will not be taking questions about that. Dr. Sarah Williams met me at the nurses' station. She was a composed woman, probably mid-40s, the kind of doctor who delivers hard news with steady eyes and a voice that doesn't shake. I appreciated that. "I needed steady right then, Mr. Coleman. I'm glad you're here," she said. "Your wife was brought in this morning by your son. She presented with severe disorientation, kidney stress, and elevated toxicity markers in her blood work." "Toxicity markers?" I said. "Yes, we're running a full panel, but I want to be straightforward with you. The pattern we're seeing isn't consistent with a sudden illness. It suggests exposure to something that's been building up in her system over time." Building up, those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the edge of the nurses' station and said very carefully, "Dr. Williams, are you telling me that someone is poisoning my wife?" She held my gaze and said, "I'm telling you, we need more answers, and I think you do too. I went in to see Patty. Listen, I've seen my wife in every state imaginable. I've seen her laugh so hard she snorted. I've seen her furious enough to make me genuinely reconsider my life choices. I've seen her exhausted, happy, heartbroken, and everything in between. I was not prepared for what I saw in that room. She looked hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and slowly drained everything that made her Patty. The machines beeped, the IV dripped, and my wife, the woman who once chased a door-to-door salesman off our porch with a spatula, lay there looking impossibly small. I sat beside her and took her hand, and I made her a promise. I don't make promises lightly. Ask anyone who knows me. I told her, I'm here, and I'm not leaving until I know exactly what happened to you. I walked back out to the waiting area. Danny and Crystal had shown up. Of course they had. Danny stood up and said, "Dad, we should talk. There's a lot you don't understand." I held up one hand. Something in my face must have communicated exactly where we stood, because he stopped mid-sentence. "Not yet," I said. Then I walked to a quiet corner and started doing the one thing they never saw coming. I pulled out my phone and began locking every single bank account they had any access to. Every single one. See, here's the thing about being married for 30 years and working in insurance fraud. You learn to protect your assets first, ask questions later. Within 15 minutes, I had changed every password, removed every emergency contact, and restructured every automatic transfer. When the notifications started hitting their phones, I watched Crystal's face first. That smile she'd been wearing all afternoon disappeared like smoke. Now we were having a real conversation. Danny's phone started buzzing, then Crystal's. Then Danny looked at me with something that might have been panic. "Dad, what did you do? Why can't I access the accounts?" I looked at him for a long moment. This was a young man who, just last Christmas, had hugged me at the door and told me he was grateful for everything we'd done for him. I typed back one sentence. "You should have thought about that before you touched my wife." The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Patty was improving slowly. Dr. Williams was cautiously optimistic. The treatment was working and her kidney function was stabilizing. But I had work to do. I called Lisa Anderson, a sharp attorney I'd worked with on several fraud cases over the years. She had the energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed watching people face consequences for their actions. I told her everything. The hospital visit, the toxicity reports, the way Danny and Crystal had been sitting in my living room like they owned the place. She was quiet for exactly 5 seconds. Then she said, "Rick, don't touch anything in that house. Don't confront either of them. Don't say anything or hint at anything. Can you do that?" "I can do that," I said. "Good," she said, "because I'm going to make sure that when this lands, it lands completely." On day 2, I started digging into our financial records. 25 years of investigating insurance fraud teaches you how to follow a money trail. What I found made my blood run cold. Small withdrawals over the past 4 months, $200 here, $350 there. The kind of amounts that don't scream at you, they whisper. But when I added them up, we were looking at $6,500 from our joint savings account. Money that Danny had emergency access to, $6,500. My son had been stealing from us while poisoning his mother. Gary helped me dig deeper. We found pharmacy receipts, always paid for in cash, always from a store 2 towns over. The same supplement brand purchased 3 times over 4 months. Always Danny alone, except once when the exterior camera caught Crystal waiting in the car. The supplements contained compounds that, in large enough doses over time, produced exactly the toxicity profile Dr. Williams had found in Patty's blood. But here's what really got me. The specific combination they were using wasn't something you'd stumble across by accident. Someone had done research. Someone had planned this out, calculated dosages, figured out how to administer it without detection. This wasn't a crime of passion, this was methodical. Crystal worked as a medical assistant at a clinic downtown. She had access to medical databases, drug interaction charts, dosage calculations. She knew exactly what she was doing. I sat in my car outside that pharmacy, looking at the receipt Gary had managed to get from a contact who worked there. The date was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, while I was working late on a case involving a staged car accident, my son and his wife were buying poison to kill my wife. I called Gary. "Find anything else?" he asked. "They're not amateurs," I said. "This was planned, calculated. Crystal's medical background explains how they knew what to use, Jesus, Rick." "There's more. I need you to help me check something. Patty's been taking those vitamin supplements for months. Danny suggested them after she had that ankle sprain. Said Crystal recommended them for bone health. Silence on Gary's end. Then they've been setting this up since then. At least 4 months of planning. Maybe longer. I drove home and went straight to our medicine cabinet. There they were. 3 different bottles of supplements, all the same brand we'd found on the receipts. All purchased by our loving son and daughter-in-law. I took photos of everything. Labels, lot numbers, expiration dates. Then I called Lisa. "Don't touch those bottles," she said immediately. "I'm sending someone to collect them as evidence. This is now a criminal investigation." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Christmas dinner. Danny and Crystal sitting at our table, Danny carving the turkey like he was head of the family. Crystal complimenting Patty on the stuffing recipe, all of us laughing at Gary's terrible jokes, and the whole time they were already planning this. On day 3, Patty opened her eyes and looked at me. Her voice was weak but unmistakably hers when she said, "Rick, you look terrible." I actually laughed. "Right there in the ICU. You're in intensive care and you're critiquing my appearance," I said. "Someone has to," she said. I held her hand and told her she was safe. I told her I knew what had happened. And I told her everything was being handled. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that had always seen right through me and said, "It was Danny, wasn't it?" Not a question, a statement. I didn't answer. I just held her hand tighter. She closed her eyes and said quietly, "I always worried that boy inherited my stubborn streak, but none of my common sense." The next morning, Lisa called with news that rearranged everything I thought I understood about this situation. "Rick, we need to talk in person. Now." I met her at a coffee shop downtown. The kind of place where the coffee costs more than it should, and everyone's typing on laptops like they're writing the next great American novel. Lisa slid a manila folder across the table. "Open it." Inside were documents I recognized immediately. Estate planning papers, insurance policies, financial statements.
"Where did you get these, Patty's attorney?"
She contacted us yesterday after seeing the news reports about the investigation. I stared at the papers. What news reports? "Rick, this is bigger than poisoning." 3 weeks before Patty ended up in the ICU, she visited an estate planning attorney. Alone, my hands went cold. She updated her life insurance policy. The original policy had Danny listed as the primary beneficiary, standard stuff for parents. $850,000 that would have gone to him when she passed. I flipped through the pages, seeing Patty's signature on document after document. She removed him completely, redirected everything to a literacy foundation she'd been quietly building for underprivileged kids. Something she never told you about because she wanted it to be a surprise. The room felt like it was tilting. Danny found out, "Rick?" The attorney confirmed he called the office multiple times asking about the status of the policy change. Left his real name, his real phone number. Even came in person once, trying to pose as Patty's assistant. I sat back in my chair. $850,000. Danny had been about to lose $850,000 and decided the solution was murder. "There's more," Lisa said. "The policy change had a 30-day processing window." Patty collapsed on day 27 days. My wife had 3 days left to live in their timeline. They weren't just poisoning her for fun, Rick. They were racing against a clock. I drove back to the hospital in a daze, 3 days. If I hadn't come home early, if that conference had run its full schedule, Patty would have died on schedule and Danny would have collected $850,000 for murdering his own mother. When I got to her room, she was sitting up, looking more like herself. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes had that spark that meant she was thinking again. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," she said. I sat down and told her everything. The insurance policy, the literacy foundation, the 30-day deadline. All of it. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through surprise, sadness, and finally, something that looked like resignation. "So that's what this was about," she said when I finished. "I should have known, Patty. Why didn't you tell me about the foundation?" "Because I wanted it to be perfect before I showed you. You know how I am with projects. I don't like to unveil things until they're complete." She was right. Patty had always been that way. Surprise birthday parties planned for months in secret. Christmas presents wrapped and hidden in places I'd never think to look. The Literacy Foundation was going to be my legacy, she said. Something good that would outlast us both. It still will be. Will it? After this comes out, after the trial, who's going to want to be associated with a charity founded by a woman whose own son tried to kill her for the money? I hadn't thought about that on day 4. I was sitting in Patty's room when my phone rang. "Unknown number, Mr. Coleman? This is Detective Ray Torres, Denver PD." I understand you've been working with Lisa Anderson on gathering evidence related to your wife's case. That's right. We've obtained a warrant to search your son's apartment. We'd like you to be present as a witness, if you're willing. 2 hours later, I was standing in the hallway outside Danny's apartment while 3 officers executed a search warrant. Crystal was at work. Danny was nowhere to be found. What they discovered made everything else look like amateur hour. In a shoebox under their bed, wrapped in plastic bags, they found detailed notes about Patty's daily routine. What time she woke up, when she took her supplements, how much coffee she drank, everything documented like a scientific study. There were printed articles about heavy metal poisoning, symptoms, detection rates, and lethality calculations. Crystal had highlighted sections about kidney damage and the timeline for organ failure. But the thing that hit me hardest was a notebook filled with Crystal's handwriting, page after page of dosage calculations, timing schedules, and what could only be described as a murder manual. Day 45, symptoms more pronounced, confusion increasing, kidney function declining as expected. Day 62 may need to accelerate timeline. Policy deadline approaching day 78, final phase, increase dosage to critical levels. Detective Torres handed me the notebook. Your daughter-in-law documented everything. We've never seen anything this methodical outside of professional hitmen. I read entry after entry, each one more chilling than the last. These weren't the desperate actions of people in over their heads. This was a business plan for murder. The last entry was dated 2 days before Patty collapsed. Ready to execute final phase. Target elimination by weekend. Insurance payout guaranteed. Target elimination. They'd reduced my wife to a target. I handed the notebook back to Torres and walked outside. I needed air. I needed to call Gary. I needed to make sense of how 2 people I'd known for years, people I'd welcomed into my family, had turned into cold-blooded killers. Gary met me at the police station. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I keep thinking about last Thanksgiving, Danny helping Patty in the kitchen, Crystal playing with the neighbor kids in the yard. They seemed so normal. Maybe that's what scares people most about stories like this. Evil doesn't always look like evil." On day 5, they came to the hospital together. Danny and Crystal walked through those automatic doors carrying flowers like they were visiting a sick relative, not the woman they'd been systematically murdering for months. I was waiting in the corridor when they stepped off the elevator. Danny saw me first and deployed that calculated smile I'd come to recognize. "Dad, how is she? We've been so worried." I looked at him, then at Crystal, then back at him. 30 years of raising this man, and I was looking at a stranger. "She's awake, she's talking, and she's going to make a full recovery." Something flickered behind his eyes, not relief, not joy, recalculation. "That's wonderful news," Crystal said. Her voice pitched just a little too high. "The police are on their way," I said quietly. Danny's face went white. "What?" I said. "The police are coming." I kept my voice steady, conversational. "They'll be here any minute. Dad, just listen for 1 second. Danny said, his voice cracking. "Let me explain, because—" "Explain what?" I said, stepping closer. "Explain how you sat at our dinner table for months, eating food your mother cooked while you were slowly killing her. Explain how you looked me in the eye at Christmas and told me you were grateful for everything we'd done for you. Explain how you called her your target in that notebook Crystal kept." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Crystal was staring at her shoes. "Which part needs explaining, son?" I continued. "The part where you found out about the insurance money and decided murder was easier than getting a job. Or the part where you documented every symptom like you were conducting a science experiment." "You don't understand," he whispered. "We were desperate. The debt, the pressure. Stop talking." I said it quietly, the way my own father used to say my name when I was about to cross a line I couldn't come back from. "There is nothing you can say to me right now. There is not a sentence in the English language that covers this." Crystal finally looked up. "We never meant for it to go this far." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You never meant for what to go this far? The murder part? Because you documented every single day, every symptom, every calculation. You highlighted sections in medical journals about kidney failure timelines. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" The elevator dinged, and Detective Torres stepped out with 2 uniformed officers. "Rick Coleman?" Torres approached us. "We're here for Danny Coleman and Crystal Coleman." I stepped aside and watched as they read Danny and Crystal their rights. Danny tried to speak, to explain, to negotiate. Crystal went silent in a way that suggested she was already working on damage control. The flowers fell to the floor when they put the handcuffs on. White roses scattered across the hospital linoleum like confetti at the world's worst celebration. Gary appeared beside me. I don't know when he'd arrived, but he was there when I needed him, the way he'd always been. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it honestly, like I just watched my son become someone I never knew. Like 30 years of parenting just got erased by two people's greed. And Patty, I looked toward her room through the window. I could see her sitting up in bed, talking animatedly with a nurse about something that was making them both laugh. Patty's going to be fine. She's tougher than cancer, tougher than kidney failure, and definitely tougher than anything those two could throw at her. The trial happened 4 months later. Lisa Anderson prosecuted with the precision of a surgeon and the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved justice. The case was airtight. Financial records, medical evidence, the notebook, pharmacy receipts, recorded phone calls to the attorney's office. Danny and Crystal had separate lawyers who tried separate strategies. Danny's attorney went with temporary insanity brought on by financial stress. Crystal's went with diminished capacity and claimed she was manipulated by Danny. Neither strategy worked. The jury took 3 hours to come back with guilty verdicts on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, financial fraud. Danny got 12 years. Crystal got 8. When the verdict was read, I was sitting in that courtroom next to Patty, who had insisted on being there for every day of testimony. She wanted to look them in the eye when justice was served. When it was over, she leaned over and said quietly, "I want Chinese food right now," I said. "I've been thinking about General Tso's chicken for 4 months. Do not test me on this," so we got Chinese food. Gary came. Lisa came. Dr. Williams joined us, bringing her husband, who turned out to be just as sharp and funny as she was. We sat around a table at our favorite place downtown, and we ate, and we laughed, and we celebrated the fact that good people sometimes win. Looking back now, I realize this whole thing taught me something about family that I wish I'd learned earlier. Love and trust aren't the same thing. You can love someone completely and still need to protect yourself from them. That's not cynical. That's survival. Patty and I, we're stronger now. Sounds impossible, but going through hell together will either destroy a marriage or forge it into something unbreakable. We talk more, we laugh more, and we pay closer attention to who we let into our lives and our bank accounts. The Literacy Foundation? It's thriving. Patty threw herself into building it with the energy of someone who'd been given a second chance at leaving a legacy. It's funded by the insurance money she never had to pay out, and it's helped over 200 kids learn to read in the past year. Listen, I know what some of you are thinking. How do you not see something like this coming? How do you miss the signs that your own child is capable of murder? The truth is, evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like family. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table and carves the turkey and compliments the stuffing. But here's what I learned. You can't control what people choose to become when they think nobody's watching. You can only control what you do when you find out who they really are. When the people you trust most show you their true faces, believe them the first time. I came home early that day, I found out, and I made sure every single person involved faced exactly what they deserved. That's not revenge, that's justice, that's protecting the people who matter most. That's the job. That's always been the job, and it's a job that never really ends.